Sydney was the closest friend I'd made that year. I picked her up every morning, often dropped her off, actually hung out outside of class. She'd been sad lately. In the haze of trying to find a direction for her life, she'd lost faith in herself, but applied to visual merchandising, marketing displays, window dressing, that sort of thing. I was happy she'd still be at Sheridan next year. I tried to stay calm, to make sure she wasn't bullshitting me, but when she told me what she'd done, it didn't take long to do the math. She'd taken enough drugs to kill a man my size, and Sydney was a lot smaller than me. Sid came out right when I pulled up. I knew she didn't want to cause a scandal with her landlord. I don't remember her getting in the car, if she thanked me or if I asked if I could do anything. I don't think we even made eye contact, but I do know we didn't say a word the entire way there. So this would be the part of the story where I tell you about how I drove her to the hospital and flew through red lights and stop signs, and it was really cool and I felt like a hero. But it wasn't cool. I knew she'd make it, but I wanted her to know that I cared, that I wasn't taking this lightly. It was just something that I had to do. I sat down while they checked her in, tried to just act natural, when I overheard the nurse ask why she did it. And there it was. Her boyfriend broke up with her. I couldn't believe it. Your boyfriend broke up with you? Your shitty boyfriend you never see and sounds like a total douchebag? And this is the answer. This is just a cry for help. Of course it's a cry for help. That doesn't mean she doesn't actually need help. It hurts losing someone, and we don't always know how to deal with the pain. After 10 minutes, I realized they were still talking. I turned around, and they're fucking questioning her. Some people hate hospitals because they don't like being near sick people or being reminded of their own mortality, that they too will pass. I hate them because of this bullshit. About an hour later, they said I could go in and see her. When I asked who I was about to lie and say I was her boyfriend, just in case they had a family members only policy or something like that. But given the circumstances, I decided that answer came with too great a risk I'd be answering more questions later in handcuffs, and gambled with the truth. Sydney had been moved to deep within the hospital. The longer I stayed, the angrier I got. We sat in a dark, windowless room, completely devoid of any ornamentation. The irony, of course, being that it was exactly the kind of environment that would make one most likely to commit suicide. There were a lot of awkward silences, and she seemed tired, almost too tired to talk. I wanted to ask her about her boyfriend, to tell her that it would pass. But I knew better. No one wants to hear that, because right then and there, in that hospital, it hadn't passed. It was probably the most tangible thing. I didn't really know what I felt. Annoyed? Mostly I was upset for not feeling. What was the correct emotion? We're told we should be frantically crying, or yelling at some doctor, or storming out of the hospital, knocking shit over on the way because we can't take the emotional strain of the situation. And then there's a montage. I don't go for any of that shit. So instead I just felt guilty. Well, guilty and completely useless. So I left, and discovered that I was also feeling a third thing. I stopped at a Subway on the way home, and the clerk was in a suspiciously good mood. Like, "Hey, how you doing?" I spent all night in the hospital because my friend tried to kill herself. 12-inch ham on white. What was I supposed to do with this? What do I tell people when she doesn't show up? Sydney lived in a veritable closet in the basement of a Bible-thumping hag. She almost never complained. So all of my problems started to feel very trivial. But then I remembered illustration portfolios were due soon. You just don't have the time you want to deal with the problems you have. Which is probably how Sydney felt. Of course. Time for class.